Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this press conference of the 2016 annual result presentation presented by Thomas Buberl and Gérard Arlan and Jacques de Beretti, CEO of AXA France. This conference will be followed by a Q&A session. Most representatives of our COMEX are in the room, and if you want, you can also ask questions on AXA.com, knowing that the priority will be given to questions in the room. Thomas, the floor is yours. Thank you, Julien, and good morning, all. I am delighted to welcome you here this morning to present the 2016 annual results. 2016 for us was a year of maximum changes. As you know, Henri de Castres decided to retire. Denis Duvergne was appointed chairman. The group appointed a new CEO, and we also have built a new management team for AXA. 2016 was a year of extremely robust results. For the first time in our history, we have reached the 100 billion euros in earnings with underlying earnings of 5.7%. All of this points to very strong stability with a solvency ratio at a very high level. I am very happy to know that every day we serve our 107 million clients and increase their protection, meaning the plan that we announced last year is now at the end of the first phase. Why? Because if we look at the major figures, in June of last year, we launched Ambition 2020, which is built around two pillars. The first is focus, the second is transform. Focus means dealing with operational requirements in terms of selective growth, margin increases, and also as regards improving our capital management. This is well underway, and the transform pillar deals with the issues of what more can we do to serve our clients better tomorrow. And I would like here to share with you examples of progress made in this area. But if I look at the major financial highlights, we can see that our earnings per share have grown from 3 to 7% as a function of the financial markets in question. And if we look at the environment that we have had until now, was a very demanding one. And with 4%, we are very happy to be in mid-range here. Secondly, of course, the increase in our cash flow with 6.2 billion. So we are also here facing our targets and an ROE of 25% within the range that we communicated in the new Ambition 2020 plan. Now, this points to a very solid balance sheet with a solvency ratio at a high level, despite the difficult economic context. We have also experienced a favorable launch of our Ambition 2020 plan. We are very proud to share these results with you, and this is certainly something that motivates us in doing better this year and in the coming years. Also, I wanted to share with you how we have made progress in the area of focus. First of all, health. Health is very dear to my heart because I truly believe in it myself. We are definitely a major healthcare player in the world with 12 billion in earnings, and we have also been able to increase this business to 4% and to reach very pleasant levels of profitability. Now, why do we believe that this is strategic for us? Today, we are facing a major inflation of costs in the medical world. In other words, clients need to be better covered against potential claims and diseases, and must also be reassured as concerns the organization of how they plan their health care. And of course, here we have a challenge as far as costs are concerned. How can we improve and increase the experience of our clients and at the same time control costs? Let me give you here the example of Health Gateway in the UK. It is a very new approach that helps to increase the level of healthcare protection in corporations, and also this is a very strong solution. Now, if I look at another extremely strategic market for us, let's move on to savings. Savings is still always discussed in a period where interest rates are low, because it is true that the need to save for one's retirement, for example, is higher than it was 10 years ago. If we want to have 1,000 euros per month versus what we paid into such an insurance 10 years ago, we have to understand that we need to invest more than what we invested 10 years ago for these famous 1,000 euros monthly. We also here must take advantage of these low rates to help our clients save more. I can also add here that we have increased our earnings in this particular business area. We've continued to change our business mix in favor of protection, healthcare, and products that are less capital intensive, because in these less capital intensive products, there are many advantages for the clients, and the upside is more guaranteed than with traditional products. And at the same time, we can reduce our exposure to guaranteed rate traditional products. So what we have launched in France, and I hope that Jacques de Beretti will tell us more on this topic. We, of course, here have worked on developing the T-Discovery, which make it difficult to plan retirement and to invest. Initially, this product was extremely complicated, but in fact, today, thanks to Discovery, it has been improved and simplified. And in Bordeaux, last time we were all together, we, of course, have launched this and made it available to 2,500 of our agents. Another growth area is corporate insurance. Today, of course, this represents about 50% of our earnings, and it is, of course, a market that we need to analyze in a segmented manner. We have SMEs, the local hairdresser, the local bar owner, and mid-market, so companies between 500 and 1,000 employees, and major multinationals. All of these corporations have different needs. And today, we are responding to these different needs via entities that have very different approaches. For SMEs, the major issue is how and where can I find the insurance I need in as simple a manner as possible. Here I have displayed MiniBiz, which is a Belgian example. And it is, of course, in history, it has a very complex record, but with corporations, it can be readily automated. In mid-market and larger corporations, the real need involves consulting. How can we give advice to identify the risks faced by major corporations and help them reduce their level of exposure? Of course, we here have experienced a strong growth of 2% during 2016. The fourth pillar of our strategy is Asia. Asia is large today in that part of the world, and the result of this large presence, of course, stems from the establishment of partnerships. We have experienced a growth of 16% in new business volumes in life, for example, because the same economic context exists in Europe as well as in Asia. Very low rates exist everywhere, and 16% in a low-rate economic context is a really good result. Of course, we need to work with our partners to use our partners and their capacity to access middle classes that are growing elsewhere in the world. And also, we must think about tomorrow's middle class. Here we see that there are emerging clients that we can work with through another approach that will be different as well, which is extremely simple and finely targeted on their needs. For example, if we have a woman who has set up a business in India, she doesn't need a major life insurance contract. She simply wants insurance against the fact that when she is in the hospital due to a disease or an accident, she needs to be able to feed her family. That is the only thing she really wants to insure. And of course, the issue is how can we work with the decision-making structures in Asiatic families, for example, where women are more prevalent as regards the decision to choose an insurance contract. And here we have pooled the energies of our distribution channels to better take into account the needs of women in Asia. These are the major growth pillars. The future for us is truly based in the transformation of our business. Transforming means dealing with our clients' needs better tomorrow. The source of this transformation, of course, is innovation, which is why over the past years we have created an innovation ecosystem. The two parts of these ecosystems involve, of course, the investment means via strategic ventures and the development of new business ideas, which is COMET. So we have already begun to invest in many new enterprises. The idea isn't simply to invest, but also as a learning curve for us. And therefore, we can bring funds to these companies that have many, many ideas, but that require growing their customer base. And we can help them do that. In COMET, we have also launched 3 new pilot projects, and these are moving on fairly quickly because prototypes, for example, are faster to implement than in the traditional insurance context. Also, we have the partnerships, strategic partnerships, particularly with foreign countries, including emerging economies, with innovative partners. In India, we work with Airtel, our partner JV, or in Nigeria, we work with Jumia. But we haven't only worked on partnerships and the local ecosystem, because the real source of transformation is in-house. If we are not able to help our colleagues transform, improve each day to better serve our clients, then we cannot succeed. Which is why we now have designed different means within the company to help it innovate. A very clear sign was to enlarge the management board to 40 partners, the most powerful partners of the company, to be able together to define our strategy and to work together to implement it. Also, we here have applied a major budget which serves as a provision to help our staff members acquire these new skills we need. Because today, someone who works in a call center will tomorrow have to be able to work with Facebook Messenger. It's the same type of work, but the tools are totally different. And to help our colleagues understand these differences, we need to invest. And also the diversity issue. How can we really further develop the presence of more women in our corporation? This is extremely important, and we have set a clear 30% target up to 2020 to really attract more women in managerial positions. As regards our CSR, we, of course, have to act from an investment standpoint. In 2015, we began with our decision to divest from the coal industry. In 2016, we made another decision, which was to divest from the tobacco industry. And we feel that this is extremely important for AXA. It must take a stand and act in favor of the surrounding communities because our tasks are highly social. We are at the core of our society. We want to help people, protect people, and we really need to work on all fronts in these areas because our goal is clear. We intend to help our clients so that they can live a better life. Thank you very much, and I will now give the floor to Gérard.
Merci, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, all. So I will begin this presentation by giving you the main financial highlights of our different sectors. I will then give the floor to Jacques de Beretti, who will return on greater detail in AXA France performance. And I know that the performance of AXA France is of interest to you. Let us first begin with life and savings. Globally speaking, this activity has increased by over 2%. In the first 6 months of the year, you may remember that we were at minus 2%, which points to a strong growth in the second part of the year. Now, as regards these different lines, so of course, healthcare protection represents 11% of our new business volume today, and a high growth in countries such as Switzerland, Hong Kong, and Spain. Unit linked, the minus 10% in this area can be explained by two factors. First of all, the unfavorable market conditions in Italy, and secondly, our announced withdrawal from individual savings in Belgium. Of course, here we have 15% in some areas, particularly in such countries as Hong Kong and China. Also 10% thanks to France. Our net inflow on the bottom left-hand corner reached 4.4 billion euros, and mainly on protection and healthcare products, which represented the largest inflows. And our new business volume is at 40%, which points to an increase of 5% during 2016. Let us now go on to here, of course, our underlying earnings as far as life savings, retirement, and health. We can see an increase here to 2.5 billion euros. On the left-hand side, you can see the breakdown of these underlying earnings per sector. You can here, of course, understand that protection and healthcare represent 55% of our underlying earnings, and unit-linked here, 23%. And this is quite in line with our Ambition 2020 plan, which consists here in focusing on these major lines, as Thomas said earlier on, and of course, to underline the most profitable and less capital-intensive products. On an average year, we had a yield in our asset management of 3.3%. Now, P&C, property and casualty. In all, it has grown by 3% at 35.6 billion euros on these mature markets. We, of course, enjoyed tariff increases and volume growth. In the emerging companies, plus 7%. We have strong dynamics in Mexico, also in Turkey, which, of course, here are linked to how we have aired out the portfolio, as mentioned in an earlier presentation. Also, we have made progress in the UK, Japan, France, etc. Here, P&C for individuals have shown a growth of 4%, and for our commercial lines, a growth of plus 2%. So, now, the combined ratio and the underlying earnings. Our combined ratio is gone from 96.2 to 96.5%. This slight hike can be explained by two factors. First of all, a growth in acquisition fees to acquire new commercial lines, and finally, lesser provisions on the preceding financial year. In all, the underlying earnings have increased for P&C at 2%, and the yield of our assets at 3.4%. Now, asset management now, and of course, underlying assets under management, minus 3% at AXA IM, which can be explained by France Life's withdrawal, because after its merging with Aviva, of course, this explains the drop of AUM under here. And in all, minus 1% in AB, and if we hadn't had the withdrawals of France Life, we would have seen a growth in our assets of plus 2%. Now, if we look at the underlying earnings in asset management with net inflow that totals 45 billion, i.e. significant inflow, AXA IM represented here 56 billion and 38 for JVs in Asia. AB, as we had already announced on September 30th, has a drop in inflow at minus 12 due to institutional changes. Also, we can see a drop of 2%. And this, of course, at AXA IM is at minus 1% because we've lost France Life contracts. We would probably have been above the low range if these withdrawal had not taken place. It's a fiscal change with 50 million euros in tax charges, which is not recurrent, but we would have been at 6% growth for AB. Now I'm going to give the floor to Jacques de Béretti, who will be talking to us about the performance of AXA France. Thank you, Gerald. Good morning, all. It is my privilege today to present for the first time the results of AXA France. and it is, of course, a pleasure. I would first like to draw your attention to 4 or 5 points that, in my opinion, warrant your attention. First of all, our earnings is now at 22.8 billion euros, up 4.1% versus last year, which involves a small billion additional. And also, this was the result of life insurance that is at plus 8.5%. If we now look at the results of our operations, it is stable and solid at 1.38 billion. And as you can see on the upper right-hand corner of the slide, it is spread on all of the sectors where we are present, and particularly protection and healthcare and savings, both as regards our unit-linked products that we have strongly developed this year and Euro funds. Now, I would like to zoom on P&C. You can see that profitability has quite clearly improved, and the combined ratio is now at 94.1%, improving by 1.2% versus last year. So this, despite an increase in the number of natural disaster claims and also automotive issues. Last point I would like to underscore here is life insurance that is doing well, growing by 5.8%. If we look at our activities more closely, savings, of course, had very strong behavior last year. And what's very important is that the diversification rate, i.e. the rate of unit-linked products on savings in 2016, is established at 40% in a very volatile economic market, and it is a stable rate, and it is a fairly high-level performance because it is twice as much as the French market as a whole. Of course, this is the fruit of the constant innovation underway in our unit-linked product management, and also to the improvement of the skills in our teams. And I'll come back to this later. Now, as far as healthcare and protection are concerned, you can see a growth of 6%. Health within that is at 8%. And once again, this reflects the increase in our portfolio of 25,000 contracts within 1 year, and points to the capacity we had to pounce on all of the opportunities available. So now, individual lines, you can see that this points to a growth of 8%. So this was part of our list of targets for our action plan, and it involves very strong pooling of our commercial agents' energies, who brought in 306,000 new business opportunities in 2016. These are numbers, they're strong, they're robust, and they're right on time. I wanted to share with you our vision and our roadmap, and you will see that this is fully aligned with what Thomas and Gerald have described: focus and transform. So our vision is very simple for 2020. We need to be the first multi-specialist insurer, thanks to a multi-access, competitive, and innovative approach to service, and also to provide more simplicity for our clients. We are not multi-specialist in France. We are a generalist insurer. What we want to see tomorrow is that we can contribute the highest added value possible to our clients. This was why we restructured our company on January 1st, 2017. We brought together all the people working in the same business and made one team per area of business. and this will simplify matters for our clients. We also want to set the example as regards regulatory demands. Of course, this is a requirement, but it's also an opportunity to better serve and to better defend our clients' interests. Earlier on, Thomas mentioned the Discovery app that we've made available to our networks. This app very clearly provides the level of advice that we need to better determine our clients' profiles and needs, and therefore to be right on tack with their expectations. Now, mobilization, the pooling of energies involves everyone. AXA Prevention, as you know, is quite active, so no need to return to that. And I would also like to talk about our CSR. You know that at the end of 2015, we here had worked on the legalization of these different offers, because we considered that these offers provided individual or collective benefits for society. And I am today happy to say that 60% of this new business are included in these citizen offerings. Also, I would like to talk about microinsurance, where you know that we have been one of the major players in partnership with the ADIL Association. Now, I also wanted to talk about what we can offer our clients, to give our clients the possibility of choosing how they want to work with us, by phone, by internet, with an agent, face-to-face. It's a very strong ambition. We have started to walk down this road. For example, today we have a hybrid approach to our products for our clients who can become a client on the net and then conclude the contract with a physical agent. And this also will cover our automotive contracts. Now, protection. Protection is our business. We have grown tremendously in 2016 internationally to accompany our international clients, particularly as regards corporate insurance. Now, I wanted to mention cyber risk. Cyber risk is an emerging issue. We have reacted and launched two types of offers for individuals. We have an offer called the Integral Family Protection Product to be able to protect individuals against identity theft, fraud in e-trade, and so on. And this insurance has already been sold to over 100,000 of our clients last year. And as far as corporations, commercial lines are concerned, we now have an innovative approach. And Gaëlle developed this particular offer when she was working with AXA France. It's not a generic product. It is a specific, individualized product. As regards innovative services with high value added components, we here are going to be able to better serve our clients and to become a partner instead of remaining a payer. And you know that in 2015, we have developed remote consultation. And at the end of the year, a large proportion of our clients had access to remote medical examinations, in fact. And in Paris, we can deliver medication at home, and we are currently, with AXA Assistance, implementing the capacity to have a video chat with the doctor as well as with the patient, which is something that we do not have yet. Now, as regards services and added value, we want here, of course, to offer clients to be able to protect them upstream from all of these natural disasters. We were able in last year to launch 1.5 million alerts and ring the alarm bells in order to help individuals do what is necessary to protect their homes and themselves. So we want to make things as simple as possible for our clients, and a company with whom it is a comfort to work and to interact with. Also, whether this is when the contract is underwritten into 2016, we have widely, of course, simplified electronic signatures, which are used by 1/3 of our networks today. We also have here changed our approach to daily lives. In December, we launched the first non-AXA interface, which is much swifter than its predecessor. And of course, you still have the possibility of having chats. You can also get affidavits. This was done over 150,000 times last year. You can also get your premiums or claims management premiums wired via your bank. Now, we clearly need to reassure our clients, but we must also facilitate their lives and their claims declarations, for example, or claims reports, and the capacity to declare these claims online, to be able to track how the claim is being managed online. And we now have the possibility of offering our clients an online expertise via their smartphone, which, of course, can make it easier to manage claims. So you see that we are quite clearly ambitious in all of these areas with a very strongly prepared roadmap to better serve our clients, to simplify our procedures for our clients, to be closer to our clients, and of course, with the legendary skills of AXA teams, as you know, but also thanks to our distribution channels for Salesforce in France. And for us, this is, in fact, a real nugget. Thank you for your attention, and I now return the floor to Gérald for the rest of his financial presentation. Thank you, Jack, for the presentation of the AXA France roadmap. I wanted to summarize our results for you and also point to the financial robustness indicators of our group. So the group's underlying earning has increased has increased by +3% from 5.5 to 5.7. Also, here how it is divided according to our different business areas. You can see that P&C is 39%, 39% of 5.7 billion. Protection and health represent 27%, and these two areas of business, P&C and health, represent approximately 2/3 of our underlying earnings. And we need to keep in mind that these are the sectors that are the least connected to financial markets. And we must, of course, transform our approach to these most profitable business areas, such as Thomas was mentioning earlier on, and less capital intensive as well. Also, here, earnings per share is up 4%. I would now like to go on to the adjusted earnings aspect, increased by 3%, which of course reflects the hike in our underlying earnings. And of course, these adjusted earnings are the indicator on which we base our dividend distribution policy. And this, of course, is up 2% in line with these adjusted earnings. I now suggest that we look at the financial robustness indicators. To begin with shareholders' equity up by 2.1 billion euros, and this increase, as you can see here, is the result, essentially, of the contribution of adjusted earnings on a yearly basis. Our solvency ratio is at 197%, very well positioned in the range that we had set for ourselves, i.e., from 270 to 300%. Also, our ranking at Standard & Poor's was moved up to AA minus stable. Let us now look at the general fund assets. These assets in all represent the assets that we have invested for 583 billion euros, excluding unit-linked. And also here, we have invested as well as in bonds, and this corresponds to our asset and liability management. And here in 2016, our investment was at 1.8%. Now, dividends. Dividends, thanks to our strong underlying earnings and robustness of our balance sheet. For the next General Assembly, we will propose 1.16 in dividends, up 5%. This, of course, involves a distribution rate of our adjusted earnings of 48%, which is up versus last year because we were at 47% last year. Let me remind you that our distribution policy is between 45 and 55% of adjusted earnings. Thomas is now back on the podium to conclude this conference. Thank you, Gerald. To conclude, we today have presented quite robust results. For me, this heralds a positive point of departure for Ambition 2020, presented in June last year. We are clear as regards this ambition. Our focus is focus, and also the implementation and improvement of how we work with our clients. I spent a lot of time in entities. I mentioned France. I've been to Mexico, to US last week, where I talk with the teams. The teams are proud to work for AXA. And very often people say, transformation? Should we be afraid of transformation? No, not at all. Transformation will boost your energy. You have seen how Jack is energetically dedicated to the transformation of AXA France. And I think that this is true for client services, distribution channels. People want to change the way we do business and how we can better serve our clients, because we really need to be dynamic as far as innovation is concerned. We have an entrepreneurship mindset. We want to be a world leader in innovation as regards the insurance sector, because our vision is how can we truly give each and every one of our clients a better life. Thank you very much for your attention. And now the floor is yours for your questions. And before you ask your questions, I would ask you to quickly introduce yourself. Thank you very much.
Qui veut commencer?
Who wants to shoot first? Good morning, Florent de Lambilly from Insurance Pro. I have a few questions for AXA France. You talked about the increase in a commercial line portfolio, and I wanted to know what is the weight of the increase in prices on this sector in particular. Also, the impact on transformation of employment. We saw the assumptions that were applied to Belgium. Could our country also suffer from these repercussions at group level and in France in particular? Thank you for both questions. I'm going to ask Jack to respond to the first, and we'll also give you the French answer for the second question, and I will cover the second part of your question from a more global standpoint. Right. So thank you very much for this interesting question. As regards French business, you can see that we had here a very high growth at 3.1%, pulled forward by life insurance, which also has a slight high, but to give you a specific answer to your question, it is slightly up as regards individual insurance policies, and also slightly down as regards our commercial lines, which points to the fact that there were two issues that appeared in 2016. First of all, we did not increase our prices. We were in a fairly peculiar context with increased competition that resulted from the Macron Act. And of course, this gave us a slightly weaker increase in P&C than the usual increase that we've been able to display until now for 2016. Also, as far as our social activities are concerned, we always at AXA France are very favorable to social dialogue, which was proven once again by the fact that we signed an agreement on salaries. And we pursue this with our social partners, i.e. unions and so on. We have very strong agreements with GPEC that guarantees our staff members a career development plan in our company or in the French entities of the group. And our main challenge, we have to be clear here with each other. Of course, we downsize our labor force, but this is often the result of people who go off into retirement and who are not necessarily replaced. But this has to be done to be able to face up to the two pillars of focus and transform that were, of course, here propelled by Thomas. Yes, and well, if we ask again, what does transformation mean? Transformation doesn't only mean I go from paper to screen. Transformation is, in our case, a change of how we deal with the end customer. How can we improve their customer experience? How can we tie a closer and stronger relationship with the end customer? And how can we, in fact, increase the number of services? Jack gave us a few examples of these services. This means that we have new skills that we need to acquire. We need to hire new profiles, and we also here have people whose former profession no longer exists, and this involves a very strong dialogue with our teams. So it means that the roots of our social dialogue are very, very strongly implanted, embedded in our DNA. And of course, we must decide what are the local means necessary to ensure this transformation and to remain competitive, which is why the answer to transformation in France, Belgium, UK, Germany is always different. And this is why you see different programs with different levels of intensity, but always with in mind the social dialogue to find, through this dialogue, the social solutions. Hello, inevitably, the two questions on Italy. The first is Generali. Can you confirm officially that you do not have interests in the Italian company? And also, how does this impact your Montepaschi approach? Yeah, well, this is new because the usual question is how much do we own of other players on the market? Well, we were very clear here on the market, saying that a merger between AXA and this player was not particularly of interest to anyone. MPS, I believe, and as you've seen, has announced an increase in capital, 8.6 billion euros, a massive, massive increase. And this, of course, will allow MPS to return to business. Now, as regards the conditions of this capital increase are not yet known. Obviously, this will return them to the business world. We have a contract and partnership with MPS that are both doing well, and we are quite ready to pursue the partnership. And of course, we are supporting management as we support the capital increase itself. Thank you. I wanted to add something to the question on Generali, because this question is often asked. And of course, it makes our M&A strategy, it makes it necessary to describe and explain our M&A policy, merger and acquisitions. And of course, here, our M&A approach excludes small acquisitions and very large acquisitions. Our focus today is how can we take a stronger position in lines that we've targeted, healthcare, commercial lines in P&C and Asia. And this is where we are seeking opportunities for the future. Two questions over there. A lady, I think. We have time to take all your questions this morning. Good morning, Muriel Brennan, Investir. I wanted to know how, in the management of your asset portfolio, you take into account the political risks in France, and if you are very often questioned by foreign investors on these subjects. I have to ask the Frenchman here to answer this question. Gerald, well, today our exposure is highly diversified. Of course, we're exposed to the French government and to French equity, which haven't increased lately because we have essentially invested in corporate bonds, diversification products, because they're more profitable. You know, I think that this is a more general comment, but obviously France's spread has increased a little bit. And of course, today, the bonds in France must be at 1%. And 10 years ago, we had an increase of 150 basis points at a very quick pace. So we need to remain calm. We must certainly not panic. Our portfolio is highly diversified. This is what I can tell you. And if I were to take the example of 2016, but it'll be the same in 2017, you can see that in 2016, we essentially bought corporate bonds and other diversified products. This is the panorama and situation we find ourselves in today. Thank you, Gerald. Hi, Laurent Thévenin, Les Echos. Can you give us the first financial highlights as regards your savings plans? Gerald? Yes, you remember that when we presented our plan on June 21st, we had indicated a target of 2.1 billion, and in fact, we have here reached 16.3 billion. So we confirm our end target at the one that I mentioned. So we are essentially present in Europe, and in Europe, the issue of social dialogue is very important, which means that initially we need to make investments in negotiations and discussions in the social dialogue. So this curb to help us control costs will not be linear because we're working until 2020 here on the control of costs. Yes, Grégoire Pinsent challenge. This is a question from Mr. de Peretti on slide 22, the results of AXA France. We can see here a significant drop in the underlying earnings in savings and retirement and P&C, whereas everywhere else there is an increase. So I wanted to have an explanation of this divergence. Thank you for your question, which demonstrates that you are quite accustomed to these press conferences as far as life, retirement, and savings. We, of course, have underlying earnings that are lesser than last year. Is this the result of the volume of business? It is not at all an issue that was brought in by the 306,000 new business volume contracts that we brought in last year, because everything else is in clear blue sky. And we last year had an exceptional bonus in borrowers' policies, which was not renewed in 2016. That's the only explanation I can give you. Any other questions? Two ladies over here. Good morning, Reuters. Two questions, please. The first, to continue with the M&A issue. There seems to be a trend towards consolidation in asset management. Do you intend to participate in this? Are you looking for a partner in Europe, for example? And the second question, as regards your innovation strategy, you established several strategic partnerships last year. Are you working on something else this year in healthcare or perhaps in the automotive industry? I will begin with the second question. It is true that partnerships are very important because in the past, when we would invent something new, we always had to start on our own. Today, speed has increased, and this is why it is essential for us to set up a partnership. And we also need to ask ourselves who these partners actually are. very often we find partnerships with startups. Now, I think that it's important, and you have probably seen that we have begun to establish partnership with startups. There was an example in Nigeria with Jumia, such partnerships in this category, of course. But I think that the real opportunity will be to set up partnerships with large corporations because, and I'd like to return to the M&A policy, who are our competitors tomorrow? This may no longer be European insurers, but rather stakeholders in other sectors that are coming into insurance. If you are a medical device producer, the next step to be closer to your patients and to work more with client data is to provide healthcare insurance. Here we realize, and the approach to partnership that we've chosen is how can we do better if there's two people working together, but how can we also attract our potential competitors of tomorrow in partnerships today? And obviously, we have targeted such partnerships in Asia and in Africa, and we are working on these issues to be able to dedicate more time, more energy, and more investments in transformation. Today, AXA has two entities in asset management. We have AB, AllianceBernstein, essentially focused on the US, and AXA IM, that is much more focused in Europe. Both of these corporations are undergoing the same transformation because they were involved in professions that exert pressure on earnings and also active investments or fixed income, for example. And they here have worked hard at developing satellites in alternative areas to be able to offset the reduction of costs, of expenses. So today, AXA IM is a leader in real estate. We are also a leader in short-term duration high yield. And we really intend to develop these activities within both asset manager entities. Hello, Grandin, la GFI. Can you return to the drop in earnings in unit-linked products? And also, can you give us more specification on the drop in combined ratio and ROE? Okay, Gérald gets to answer all three. First of all, unit-linked products. I will start with the top line issue, business per se. I told you that there were two main reasons for this drop in 10%. First of all, we have markets that were unfavorable in Italy within the framework of our partnership with MPS that we were mentioning earlier on. We sold many unit-linked products, and these unit-linked products were in Italy as elsewhere during the first half of the year impacted by markets that were not good, and this is a phenomenon that was visible everywhere, including in France. And then there were issues linked to MPS proper. Also, we have a unit-linked product activity in Belgium, and we, as you know, have decided to withdraw from individual lines in Belgium, which explains the business part of the question. Now, as regards results, the unit-linked product, we had a drop pre-tax of 2%, and this, of course, was due to fees that are lower and that come from Italy. So the same reason as for business. And let me remind you that in Europe, the unit-linked products have suffered, as I said earlier on, due to lower equity market levels. And this explains partially, at least, the drop of 2%. Then, of course, in the U.S., we have had more offsetting issues, but globally, this is what happened. Also, there's a third question, I believe, which is the combined ratio. The combined ratio, as I said earlier on, increased. And where does this come from? Well, I'm going to use something that is a little bit finer between individual line and commercial lines. Now, as far as individual lines are concerned, we have gone down by 0.03%. So there is an improvement, as we were able to see on the individual lines. But as far as commercial lines are concerned, we have a degradation of 0.3, 0.4 points, and this is the result of acquisition fees, where we had to invest to acquire new clients, and this is what explains this slight deterioration. Our levels of confidence have not budged. On June 21st, we presented a plan saying that at the maturity date of 2020, we were aiming for 95, 94%, and through this particular presentation, we are confirming that objective. Thank you, Gérald. Lionel Garnier, Le Revenu. 3 questions, please. I've understood that as far as asset management is concerned, you have poles of excellence that you want to reinforce. But we see that there are also temptations of consolidation. Is this applicable to AXA IM or to AllianceBernstein? Are you reflecting on industrial solutions to reduce costs? Also, as regards free cash flow, which is stable year on year, at which date can we expect to see an improvement, a hike, a growth? And also, can you give us information on the reason for the decrease? I'm going to start with your first question, and Gérald will be able to answer questions 2 and 3. As far as asset management is concerned, as I said earlier on, we are currently changing our business. We can see the same trend as is the case in life. And we today are on the right road. It is true that in our business, we are seeing strong consolidation of businesses, but our question is this a strategy that makes sense? Because if we are to analyze all of the acquisitions of the past, there aren't very many that have brought in value. If we want to walk down that road, then we need to find an acquisition or a merger which makes sense. And if we examine the market today, there are limited candidates. So it is important for us to grow ourselves because asset management is quite closely linked to life insurance. As far as AXA IM is concerned, a large share of the investment is our own balance sheet. And if we project into the future as regards life insurance, the issue of how we structure assets in these life insurance contracts are in fact a key skill of any insurer. And this is why we need to have these skills in-house and to be able to develop them further. This is why I think that we should differentiate the environment, and does this make sense for us? The group's cash flow, 6.2 billion euros. First of all, free cash flow, around 2 billion, stable versus last year. You're absolutely right. But you need to understand that this is the cash flow of our operatives, our life insurance, our P&C, and our asset management entities. So behind this, we have the holding company. And you may have noticed that the holding company has contributed, as I said earlier on, has improved. So we can see here the improvement of our cash flow. Now, free cash flow, we had said that this covered about 28 to 32 billion. Well, you can do the math. When we are at 6.2 multiplied by 5, we're probably in the upper range. So I have no fear for the future. Number 3, do not forget that what is important for us is what is fed back to the group, i.e. the remittance ratio. And this remittance ratio is fed back to the holding, representing 65 to 75% of free cash flow, i.e. of the 6.2 billion. So here we're at 88%, and in fact, 89%, not 88%. So we are, in fact, we are still in the upper range of our strategy. The cash flows trend is very good. So the solvency ratio, well, the solvency ratio, you know that, first of all, I said earlier on, at 197%, we're middle range between 210 and the lower number. And of course, this is because rates have dropped in Europe, and we are, of course, exposed to fluctuations in rates in Europe. But our solvency is very robust, and amongst the most robust amongst our competitors. Thank you. Any other questions? Noam Searle, Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal. Marine Le Pen heads the political service today, and she is proposing a Brexit or a Frexit. And is this something that you're hedging against or not? It is true, and Gerald explained this very quickly with the issue of spreads. The uncertainty as regards the political situation in France prior to the elections has increased in level. We are quite aware of the fact that there is a Frexit scenario, but personally, I believe that the probability is not as high as we think, because in view of all the volatility that we see in Europe and in France, this is a major opportunity for Europe to be able to focus on what is the future of the European Union. And in this case, the Franco-German pair is a wonderful alliance. Now, obviously, we need to examine the situation, but if we, in fact, here take into account our business, this means protecting people, and Frexit potentially is certainly not the first crisis that we've experienced in AXA, and we are risk managers per se. Another question over there? I had a question that was very close to that of my woman colleague. Are you preparing anything particular to hedge against this uncertainty in view of the fact that French elections are quickly approaching? And also as regards M&A, this is 1 billion per year. I think that in 2016 you did less, so maybe you could accelerate in 2017, 2018. Gerald? Yes. I think that I gave my answer earlier on. Of course, hedging, we need to be reasonable. When we have a balance sheet of almost 600 billion, hedging is marginal and could in fact lead to making the wrong decisions. We hedge every day by the way in which we diversify portfolios and manage our risks. It's not when we're now only that we're going to buy protection against this, but over the past 2 years, we have highly diversified our investments. I told you that we didn't purchase any French values of any kind or shares shares or bonds, and they're still very low today. You buy at 1%, but there are other opportunities by taking low risks that can give us much more than -1. And last year I said that we purchased corporate risks that we could hover around the 2% plus. Now, yes, as far as our budget is concerned, we said that we had 5 billion in budget for the 5 years of the plan. It's still true. And of course, this year we didn't make an acquisition, so we have a little over 5 billion. That's all it means. But I think that what's important is exactly what Thomas said earlier on, is that we need to grow on external growth in particular, so that we can reach our objectives, i.e. the pair to partners, selectivity, and so on, and to work more on commercial lines. Well, so we mustn't necessarily go into an acquisition this year. This is not for the moment focusing on any form of acquisition. Any other questions in the room? Mitch Protard from Reuters. I have two questions. The first involving the stock price of the share, down 4% last year, despite the implementation of your strategic plan. Obviously, there are considerations that are specific to the insurance sector, but how do you analyze the evolutions in your stock price? And also, what about the Penelope Gate? We know that there were links between the AXA Group, etc., and the Fillon family, and the consulting firm in particular. So, so what was the relevance of the consulting firm's advisory role? Well, as concerns our stock price, I think that we have seen a slight drop versus others. And let me give you an example. Since the beginning of this year, it is a fact that AXA is at -4, -5%. And then you have other companies that are at the same level. And then you have Allianz that is at +6. Because AXA, in the meantime, announced a share buyback plan. And of course, they have this massive approach. This is not our strategy. We were very clear. There will be no dilution. Now, we work according to these principles. Now, as regards massive share buyback that can improve in the short term the robustness of a stock price. We are much more confident in our 2020 policy to restore value to our shares. Thank you, Gerald. Now, the advisory consulting role. It is true that between 2012 and 2014, AXA had asked for advice on funding long-term investments within the context of the European financial crisis at the time, and it was a consulting mandate, which is normal in our sector and in other sectors in large corporations. This mandate was focused on the issue of long-term investments and not, as you may have read in the press, on the issue of the public health care system or social security in France. And you probably read yesterday or the day before that the leader of the Assemblée Nationale ethics governor said that this was absolutely legal and that Mr. Fillon was at all times did not have a conflict of interest with this approach. Any other questions? I think that we have taken all the questions in the room, but there may be questions on the web.
The first one from Chris Cundy from Insurance ERM. The UK government is about to make a change to the Ogden discount rate, which is expected to mean that motor and liability insurers will have to hold extra reserves. What Ogden rate are you assuming, and how much have you adjusted your reserves by?
Okay, Gerald, I'll leave that question to you.
Yes, okay, thank you. So what I could tell you is that also the industry has not been a party to this to the consultation, and such we don't have presently any clear view about the UK government's intention. We have anticipated in our reserving a reduction of the discount rate to 1%.
Thank you, Gerald. There was another question.
La deuxième question.
The second question from Jean-Émile at the BBC. What is AXA's strategy in Africa by 2020 and 2030? Thank you for this question. Africa for us is certainly a major strategic challenge. We are already present in many African countries, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Nigeria, and also in countries such as Senegal. For us, Africa is very important because there is a new middle class that is growing, and therefore we are focused on growth with this new middle class, either via our existing entities that I've mentioned, and then we can focus on health and commercial risks. And we also try to apply approaches that are different to those that we apply in Europe. For example, in Egypt, there aren't very many healthcare systems available. And in this case, the insurer can help to build the system locally in Egypt. And we've already started working on remote medicine, as Jack has done in France. The second part involves partnerships. I had mentioned partnership with Jumia in Nigeria. Here we want to go into more partnerships because this is where we find the innovative models. The third issue is the emergence of new middle classes and new customers, and smartphones are very popular in Africa. And with micro-insure and the participation we hold in it, we can, of course, here work with emerging customer bases, or perhaps with telephone operators, such as the example that I mentioned with Airtel in India, but it's the same model. And this helps us help this new customer base. It is also important for us from another standpoint. It is not possible to copy the European approach and copy and paste it to Africa. These new clients, these new technologies require a completely new approach versus the European approach. Extremely simple products, digital, and products that are very, very simple. Because for us, this is how we can feed innovation in Europe. because we can learn a lot from African countries and apply that to innovate in Europe. Do you have any other questions on the web? Obviously not. Thank you very much for your presence, for your questions. And I wish you a very good day and a good article. Thank you very much.